Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the July 25th, 2012 Pittsburgh Board of Public Education Legislative Meeting. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off all cell phones and pagers or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In lieu of our Distinguished Achievement Awards this evening, we will have a special presentation by Heather Hobson of both the state and city proclamations issued in celebration of the district's 100 years.
Thank you, Mrs. Suzuka. Good evening, everyone. The district's centennial celebration continues tonight with a special reading of two proclamations. To mark the 100th anniversary of Pittsburgh Public Schools, the General Assembly of Pennsylvania passed House Resolution number 788 and Senate Resolution number 304. We are honored to receive such recognition in a year when we graduated our 100th high school class and invited the first Pittsburgh Promise College graduates to the commencement ceremonies. We hope to continue that legacy for the next century to come. First, I'll read the proclamation from the House of Representatives. In the House, June 26, 2012, whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools was founded in 1911, bringing 61 separate and independent school districts under the direction of one newly appointed 15-member board to better serve the city of Pittsburgh's children and families. And whereas during the 2011-2012 school year, Pittsburgh Public Schools celebrates its 100th anniversary. And whereas more than 26,000 students are educated in grades pre-K through 12, and more than 5,500 individuals are employed. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools achieved adequate yearly progress as a school district for the second time in 3 years in 2011. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools was ranked 7th in the nation among public school systems in large United States cities in the Great Schools Best City to Live and Learn 2010 report. And whereas in 2009, Pittsburgh Public Schools was awarded $80 million in competitive grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Federal Department of Education's Teacher Incentive Fund program to support its Empowering Effective Teachers plan. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools is taking giant steps forward to assure that there is an effective teacher in every classroom every day. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools believes that through its Empowering Effective Teachers work, more than 80% of its students will complete a 4-year college or workforce certification. And whereas Pittsburgh Public School students have access to the largest Promise Scholarship program in the nation. And whereas 3,200 Pittsburgh Public School students have received Pittsburgh Promise scholarships to attend either a technical trade school that offers a 2-year degree and any college or university in this Commonwealth, regardless of income. And whereas more than 600 of Pittsburgh Public School students will be in the inaugural class of Pittsburgh Promise Scholars that will graduate from a 4-year college or 2-year workforce certification program during the 2011-2012 school year. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Linda S. Lane is leading the way to build a sustainable district to ensure that the city of Pittsburgh children can continue to be prepared to achieve academic excellence and strength of character so they have the opportunity to excel in all aspects of life. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives honors the 100th anniversary of Pittsburgh Public Schools, and it's further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Pittsburgh Public Schools, 341 South Belfield Avenue, Pittsburgh, PA 15213. I certify that the foregoing is a true and correct copy of House Resolution number 788, introduced by Clymer, Reedshaw, Ahmet, Brennan, D. Costa, P. Costa, Davis, De Guillermo, Everett, George, Helm, Hennessy, Courts, Longietti, Major Maloney, Millard, Miller, Mirabadio, Mert, O'Neill, Pashinsky, Pickett, Rapp, Raventhal, Rock, Robert, Ross, Saylor, M. Smith, Sony, Staubach, Swanger, and Geist. The second is the Senate of Pennsylvania. In the Senate, May 1st, 2012, whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools was founded in 1911, bringing 61 separate and independent school districts under the direction of one newly appointed 15-member board to better serve the city of Pittsburgh's children and families. And whereas during the 2011-2012 school year, Pittsburgh Public Schools celebrates its 100th anniversary. And whereas more than 26,000 students are educated in grades pre-K through 12, and more than 5,500 individuals are employed. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools achieved adequate yearly progress as a school district for the second time in 3 years in 2011. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools was ranked 7th in the nation among public school systems in large United States cities in the Great Schools Best Cities to Live and Learn 2010 report. And whereas in 2009, Pittsburgh Public Schools was awarded $80 million in competitive grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Federal Department of Education's Teacher Incentive Fund program to support its Empowering Effective Teachers plan. And whereas Pittsburgh Public Schools is taking giant steps forward to assure that there is an effective teacher in every classroom every day. And so it goes forth to say that it was resolved that the Senate honor the 100th anniversary of Pittsburgh Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Pittsburgh Public Schools, 341 South Belfield Avenue, Pittsburgh, PA 15213. I certify that the foregoing is a true and correct copy of the Senate Resolution number 304, introduced by Senators Jay Costa, Wayne D. Fontana, John Pippi, Richard Kasunik, Dominic Pillay on May in the year of our Lord, 2012. Thank you. Pardon? Would you like this? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Do you have the city proclamation?
Just the House of Representatives and the Senate. One moment.
Okay, let me just say we did receive also a proclamation from the city of Pittsburgh. So we want to extend our thanks for acknowledging, from all of these bodies acknowledging us very much, because it is exciting. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley. Mr. Brentley's absent. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Here.
Mrs. Fink.
Here.
Dr. Hawley. Dr. Hawley's absent. Mr. Eisler.
Present.
Mr. McCray.
Here.
Ms. Shealy. Ms. Shealy's absent. Mr. Sumter.
Present.
Mrs. Azuda.
Present.
6 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to please share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Azuda. The Pittsburgh Public Schools commitments. Pittsburgh Public Schools is committed to educating all children to their highest level of academic achievement. The Pittsburgh Board of Education, I should say, is committed to providing a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to providing efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators. Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to improving public confidence and encouraging strong parent-community engagement in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Will everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
Second.
McCray, Sumter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving right along, I would like to read the statement on executive sessions. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting on June 27, 2012, the board met in executive sessions on June 16, 2012, July 18, 2012, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. The board does not vote at executive sessions. We'll begin this evening with the committee report on education that is before you, submitted by Ms. Shireen Shealy and her committee. Agenda item number 52 was pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any additional items on the education committee report that board members would like to pull for further discussion at this time? Dr. Lane.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I'd like to point out to the board that item number 27 on page 10, it's the bottom of the page, we'd like to correct the date that the film will take place from August 25th to October of 2012. We don't have a specific date, October 2012.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Mrs. Khaleesi.
I'm not sure if number 52 has been passed out. Did you want me to read that for the record? Okay. Number 52 is the official name of the new online academy. Resolved that the Board of Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh authorize its proper officers for Pittsburgh Public Schools Online Academy to be the official name of the new online academy that the district will launch beginning with the 2012-13 school year, which for communication purposes shall be referred to as Pittsburgh Online Academy.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Are there any other items anyone wants pulled for discussion? All right, if not, let's move to number 52. Oh, that was 52. Thank you. All right. Anything else? All right. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Items approved, 6 yes and no negative votes.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We're all confused tonight. We will now move on to the committee report on, all right, I am. We will now move on to the committee report on business and finance, submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. Agenda item number 29 was pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any additional items in the committee report on business and finance that board members would like pulled for further discussion? All right, we'll begin our discussion on item number 29, authorization for the Urban Redevelopment Authority to participate in a tax increment financing proposal for the Gardens at Market Square redevelopment area that was pulled at agenda review for further discussions. Comments, Mr. Eisler?
Mrs. Azuda, I'm just wondering, do we know why it was pulled? For discussion, just in general. There was
Right.
not a specific item.
No.
So there was not anything that we asked for clarification on?
No, but there is something that I would like the motion to reflect, that the item be approved subject to the completion of a tax assessment appeal agreement and a trustee agreement with the approval of the solicitor.
Explain why, Mr. Weiss, before that motion is made.
Yes, the tax assessment appeal agreement will address the problem which has arisen in the past several years of owners of properties in TIF districts filing assessment appeals, which have proven very difficult to administer because in a TIF arrangement, not all the taxes go to the taxing bodies. So we have made it clear to the URA that this cooperation agreement will not be executed until that agreement is also signed by the owners. The trustee agreement is simply to gain assurances from the trustee that requests of the district for information and reports will be responded to in a timely way, and to acknowledge that the trustee acts in a fiduciary capacity with respect to the district. Those are the two issues.
So I assume I still have the floor. Mr. Weiss, since we are one of 3 taxing bodies that has to approve this, will the other 2 taxing bodies accept this as part of the agreement? Does it matter?
I believe they will, but my advice to the board is that our signing this be contingent on those 2 items.
You restate so that we can get that in as a motion, and then there can be general discussion on it?
Well, the item in your book, which is item 29, it should be approved subject to the completion of a tax assessment appeal agreement and a trustee agreement meeting the approval of the solicitor.
I'd like to move that, please.
Second.
Heisler and Khaleesi. Open for discussion. Anyone? Mr. Sumter.
Try to deal with 2 items at one time. In talking about the amendment to the motion to amend the item there, can you generally speak to whether or not participation in this TIF is beneficial or negative impact on the district, and whether or not it would jeopardize participation in any other TIF arrangements?
I think it's the conclusion of the finance department and the administration and the law department that the TIF itself is beneficial. It relates to the completion of development of the Market Square area. The approval of this cooperation agreement, this TIF project, with these amendments will not jeopardize our consideration of any future TIF. Each TIF stands on its own.
In terms of running up against any limit, because there's so much you can grant for TIFs in any given year, would that pose any problems?
The limit is 10% of the assessed valuation in the taxing jurisdiction, and the current TIF level is well below 10%. This will not increase that anywhere near the limit. So there is sufficient room under the limit for any future project that may come before you.
Are we in any way, the district, giving up anything as far as tax income in the short term, as opposed to if we did not participate in this TIF, or how does it benefit the district overall?
I think the district will receive more tax revenue than it would if there were no TIF project, both in the short run and certainly in the long run.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call on that, please?
Okay, we need to vote on that amendment first.
Right.
We're going to vote on the amendment. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray? Yes. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment 6-0. So that will now become part of item 29.
Thank you. Are there any other concerns or questions on anything in the business and finance report? Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray? Yes. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Let's now move on to the report on personnel that includes addendums A, B, C, D, E, and F that are before you. Are there any questions on the personnel report at this time? Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, we have quite a few furloughs, layoffs in our booklet, and it is saddening to a lot of us to furlough or lay off any of our employees. And tonight, we will not only be furloughing teachers, but we also have other employees due to the declining population in our student declining population, and also in the loss of funding. That being said, we will continue to work with all parties, being the board, the staff, the unions, and any other parties that belong in part of this conversation, to find a way to make sure that there is never a loss of effective teachers in front of all of our students, which is our ultimate goal. That being said, Madam Chair, I'm saddened that we are doing this, but I also realize that in today's economy, I don't see how we have any other choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink? Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Asuda. I share Mrs. Khaleesi's sentiments. It is not an easy time for the district or for public education in general. If fellow board members would indulge me for a minute. Dr. Lane, a couple months ago, this board passed 8-1 a resolution to ask you to work with the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, of which we have had a great relationship over the years, to see if we could look at alternate ways to deal with some of the furloughs so it wasn't just on seniority, so that we wouldn't lose some of our most effective teachers. Could you just bring us up to date about what has happened and the work you have done and the work that you will continue to do as a result of that resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. This evening, the list we bring before you is done by the traditional means, which I think everyone's aware, which means the only things that were considered in terms of anyone's presence or absence on the list was their certification and their district seniority. The Pittsburgh Federation of Teacher Leadership and I have had a series of conversations and meetings around this topic. Unfortunately, we have not come to any agreement whereby we would be able to consider measures of effectiveness other than certification, which of course is already a part of our current process. The fact that we're doing this evening, though, does not mean that I see that quest to be over. We've worked together with the PFT leadership to develop what we believe to be stronger measures of effectiveness than certification. And so what we will still be seeking to do is use those measures rather than just certification to consider how effective a teacher might be in the future. So the work will continue on that.
Thank you. And if I can ask you a follow-up, because I would agree that certification doesn't necessarily mean qualification. Knowing all the work that you and your staff have been doing on empowering effective teachers, and knowing that we are one of 3 districts in the country that is involved in that work, nothing against the other 2 districts, but I think we're doing a spectacular job. This, since our last legislative meeting, the legislature in Pennsylvania passed a piece of legislation that dealt with teacher evaluation. And I know that you and a number of the members of your staff have worked closely with not only the Department of Education, but also with legislators and had a number of briefings. Can you just enlighten the public about that piece of legislation and how you think that will complement our work here in Pittsburgh? I should say, excuse me, Dr. Lane, I hope it will complement our work here in Pittsburgh. I think you're probably a little bit ahead, but just, yes, I know. I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Well, we believe it will support our work here in Pittsburgh. The legislature did pass Act 82, which is the teacher evaluation bill. The provisions of that support what we've been working on with the PFT all along. One of the important things we believe are important, one of the important parts of our evaluation process that was upheld, frankly, is the fact that we're using multiple ways to look at teacher practice, and we call that multiple measures. And so I think most people are aware of the fact that individuals may go in and observe a teacher and make some determinations around that teacher's practice by watching what the teacher does. But the other 2 factors that we have been looking at were one called value-added measures, which we don't have for all our teachers, but we do have for some, that measures student learning over time. So the purpose of a value-add is just to figure out where kids are and where they should be at the end of the year and see if the teacher hits that mark, exceeds the mark, or doesn't make that mark, and give some estimate of that. A third is the tripod survey, which is actually asking students questions about their perceptions of the class. And I want to clarify, it is not asking them, do you like your teacher? That is not one of the questions. But other questions about, one of the ones that we found was quite powerful, students in this class respect the teacher. And that one really stuck with me as a question because of its relationship with achievement. It was very strong. So that's one of the measures we've considered. And this data affirmed this, that 50% of a teacher's rating is going to be based on student outcome measures like value add, like tripod, rather than just on observation. So we think that's important, it's supportive, and it also supports the idea that you're going to use more than one way to look at teacher practice.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. Just on a personal note, and I think Mrs. Khaleesi said it well, I think what we're doing tonight is we have to do it for budgetary reasons. I think you and your staff have done a tremendous job of bringing us a list that is far less than we thought it was going to be. It is still very, very painful. Some of our programs, from a very personal point of view, early childhood, is being affected. Just about everything is being affected within this district, but I think you've done a marvelous job, and I want to thank you and your staff for it, even though this is an incredibly difficult vote. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray.
Thank you. First, I want to recognize our employees that are serving in the military and thank them for a job well done. And secondly, I want to kind of echo my colleagues, and this is a very sad day for this unpaid volunteer. But it's kind of cliche, and I say it at every graduation. Today is the first day of the rest of our lives. Carpe diem.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter? Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please?
It's on the Human Resources Report. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Sad yes on the report as a whole. On page 10, number 24, I abstain.
Which is that an addendum? Or?
No, in the regular report, I would have said addendum, sorry. Regular report, page 10, number 24, I abstain.
Thank you. Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Very sadly, yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole. No on item A7 on page 1 of addendum C. No on item A10, page 1, addendum D. No on item C3, page 4, addendum F.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The report's approved.
I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for making this very difficult decision. I know it was hard for you. It's something none of us wanted to do, but for the future of the district, we had to do. And hopefully in the interim, we will be able to move forward with working on some type of revised system so that we can be sure that there is an effective teacher in every classroom. Let's move on to the financial report dated June 30th, 2012. Any comments? Mr. Eisler.
I think I should bring this up at this time. I know in the past week or so, we all received the comprehensive financial report, the audit, and one of our responsibilities as the fiduciary agents for this school district, and this is only one of a number of audits that is conducted every year. My question to either Mr. Joseph or Mr. Camarda, and for the public, this audit, if you can explain a little bit about it, and in my reading of this is a clean audit without any exceptions?
Yes, sir, this is a clean audit without any exceptions.
This is just to the general fund, correct? This is not the federal funds?
This is not the single audit of the federal funds right now. That'll be coming out by the end of July.
Well, to you and your staff, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Are there any other comments on the financial statement? All right, we'll go on to new business. There are no new business items in our legislative packets this evening. Is there anything anyone wants to bring forward that needs board action? No? Are there any announcements that anyone wants to discuss? Mrs. Khaleesi? Mrs. Fink? Mr. Eisler?
I know my fellow board members really want to get out of here, but I do have to mention something. 2 weeks ago, the Allderdice High School baseball team played the Israeli national high school team on a Sunday afternoon. It was cool. Students are superb. They lost 15-9. Jeff Rosenthal, who is a very, very dedicated parent who had students in our district, had organized this. John Parker, Brad Huffer, the two coaches were there. You couldn't ask for better representation of this district. I just think that our students having the opportunity to play in a game like this was great. In talking to some of the players, there are 6 seniors who graduated this year, all promise ready, all going on to post-secondary. It is just a real testimony to the hard work of a lot of people, including our teachers, for our students. And in light, I think this had to be said in light of what we just did, that in spite of it all, we're still seeing children succeed, and we're still having teachers teach, and we're still having coaches coach, and it's fabulous. So to Jeff and all his hard work, and to John and Brad, we thank you. And that's it. They did give me a T-shirt, which, sitting across from Mrs. Fink, I don't want to pull out because it's back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back baseball victories. I know, but you're going to take me on in a carrot. You should have been at the game, Mrs. Scalese. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray, Mr. Sumter.
Read briefly in the news today that an Alderdice student was in a fatal accident, so I didn't get the name of the student, but I just want to send our prayers and condolences out to the family. And also, as mentioned before at other legislative meetings, our children are our future. Let's invest in our future, invest in our children, give to the Pittsburgh Promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Motion to adjourn? So moved. Khaleesi, McCray. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Meeting's adjourned. Give us a minute. We'll move on to the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. You okay? All right. I'd like to call to order the July 25th, 2012 meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit to order. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley is absent. Mrs. Scalese?
Here.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Hawley is absent. Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy is absent. Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Mrs. Azuda?
Present.
6 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Will board members please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
Second, to approve.
Khaleesi, Eisler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We'll move on to the Committee on Education, submitted by Ms. Shealy, Chair and her committee. Are there any questions that were not addressed at agenda review?
It's a good group. Really good group.
Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Scalese?
Yep.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
McCray?
Yes.
Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Let's move on to the committee report on business that is before us, submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. Are there any questions on the report that were not addressed at agenda review? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Scalese?
Yep.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. There are no personnel items before us this evening for the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Are there any items to be brought before the board at this time?
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Khaleesi, Fink, all those in favor? Aye. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. Have a lovely evening.